Chicagoland weather forecast. In our AM 560 Weather Center, we see sunshine this morning mixing with clouds by the afternoon and breezy, a high of 57. Currently 44. Next news at 9. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
From the Matrix Home Solutions studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
Listen to AM 560, The Answer, online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, and your Alexa-powered smart speaker, on TuneIn, iHeart, and radio.com. You can win $12,000 towards the purchase of a new car or to cover your existing car payments just by doing acts of kindness. Learn more at 560theanswer.com/kindness.
Good morning, Dan and Amy, and let's just quickly Joe Friday the facts as we understand them in the Daunte Wright case in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota. One, he was pulled over, according to police, for having expired tags on his plates.
Yeah, not an air freshener dangling from his rearview mirror.
Number two, there was an outstanding warrant for unlawful possession of a gun without a permit, and for fleeing from police. So when his brother said the other day he probably didn't know he had an outstanding warrant out for himself, that seems unlikely.
Yeah, because he resisted arrest. Yeah.
Two, the stop is two officers, junior officers, to the officer ultimately that shot him, walk up on either side of the car, driver's side, passenger side. He gets out of the car. The one officer is in the process of trying to handcuff him. He starts to resist because the officer, Potter, who shot him, and who you see her body cam video is the pertinent video. She walks up and grabs Daunte Wright's arm to sort of try and stabilize him for the other officer. He tries again to handcuff him. Daunte Wright spins out of that, jumps in the car. They, of course, follow him, and a bit of a tussle ensues, which is when she pulls out her gun and yells, "Taser, taser," and shoots him. And this is the relevant portion of that body cam video.
And then he drove away in the car, only to crash a few blocks away. But yeah, she just yelled, "I'll blank, I shot him."
Right. So, sort of the excited utterance that would lead one to believe that was an accident. And this is what Brooklyn Center Police Chief Tim Gannon had to say about that video.
As you can hear, the officer, while struggling with Mr. Wright, shouts, "Taser, taser," several times. That is part of the officer's training prior to deploying a taser, which is a less lethal device. That is done to make her partners aware, as well as the subject, that a taser deployment will be imminent. During this encounter, however, the officer drew their handgun instead of their taser. For informational purposes, we train with our handguns on our dominant side and our taser on our weak side. So if you're right-handed, you carry your firearm on your right side and you carry your taser on the left. This is done purposefully and is trained. As I watch the video and listen to the officer's commands, it is my belief that the officer had the intention to deploy their taser, but instead shot Mr. Wright with a single bullet. This appears to me, from what I've viewed and the officer's reaction and distress immediately after, that this was an accidental discharge that resulted in the tragic death of Mr. Wright.
And she's 48-year-old Kimberly Potter, the officer. She joined the force when she was 22 years old, so she's been on there for 26 years. She has 2 adult sons and a husband that's a police officer in a neighboring suburban police department. And as of right now, no dings on her record. It was a horrible, horrible mistake.
And because it was a mistake or an accident doesn't absolve her of culpability and punishment. The question is, what is that punishment? And so it's interesting to note, of course, the rush to moral panic in these instances, of course. The Brooklyn Center city manager, Kurt Bogani,
yeah,
he seemed to have disagree with Brooklyn Center Mayor Mike Elliott. Mike Elliott, the mayor there, immediately called for her to be terminated. Kurt Bogani, the city manager, called for due process, and he was fired for calling for due process.
What?
So my question, is always the alternative. Okay, so if not due process, because due process is racist, if not due process, then what? That would be my question for Mike Elliott. My question for Rashida Tlaib, in response to her tweet on the subject, would be the same. Then what? She tweeted MF Spice, MF or Spice, that is, one of the socialist Spice Girls, Rashida Tlaib from Michigan. It wasn't an accident. Policing in our country is inherently and intentionally racist. Daunte Wright was met with aggression and violence. I'm done with those who condone government-funded murder. No more policing, incarceration, and militarization. It can't be reformed. Okay, so no more police, jails.
Okay.
Then what?
Yeah, what's your alternative? Park rangers like they want in Portland?
For more on the topic, we're pleased to be joined by our friend from out Minneapolis Way, founder of PowerlineBlog.com, John, and the president of the Center for the American Experiment, John Hinderaker. John, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Hey, happy to do it.
The conversation immediately turns to what happens to the officer that accidentally shot him. What's your view on how this has been handled to this point?
Well, the rule here in Minnesota is verdict first, trial later. We've seen that with Derek Chauvin. The defense in the Derek Chauvin trial is going to begin today. And, it's just sort of, black comedy in the sense that this guy has been convicted in the press. He's been convicted by our governor, by the mayor of the city of Minneapolis. He's been convicted by everybody for the last year. And beginning today, the jury is actually going to hear his defense. I have a feeling it may be too late. And this officer, I suppose people are scanning the homicide statutes, murder 2, murder 3, manslaughter, a couple degrees of manslaughter, I believe, parsing the language to figure out what she can be charged with. I think that there's a manslaughter statute that deals specifically with negligent discharge of a firearm. So I assume she's going to be facing some significant criminal charges. But the point I would make, and obviously it's not lost on you, Dan, and Amy, or your audience, there's a reason why things like this happen, right? So they pull this guy over. They run his license, his plates through their computer, and they realize he's got an outstanding arrest warrant for illegally carrying a Ruger 45 caliber pistol in a public place, and then fleeing the police. He got away that time. He got away. And then just 10 days or so before the stop, he failed to appear for a court hearing in that criminal case. So now they pull him over. At first he gets out of the car and he seems to be complying. He puts his hands behind him and they're about to cuff him. But then he changes his mind. He decides, oh, the heck with it. I'm gonna run. I'm gonna flee. So he starts wrestling with the police officers, fighting with the police officers, much like George Floyd. And, he gets in his car and he's obviously about to flee the scene. And so this woman, Potter is her last name, Kimberly Potter, pulls out, she thinks, her taser. And, of course, as you're watching the body cam video, you're looking at it and you're saying, lady, that looks like a 9mm Glock to me, not a taser. But in the confusion of the moment, she pulls the wrong thing and she shoots him. Well, why is there confusion? Why is there tumult? Well, it's because this guy is fighting with the police officers. And when you undertake to wrestle with police officers so as to be able to flee the scene after being arrested, there are a lot of bad things that can happen. And this case illustrates that.
And she's already been placed on administrative leave, but listen what the activists in Minneapolis said yesterday.
Daunte Wright was killed by this white officer because she did not see his humanity. She did not believe that Black lives matter.
I mean, it's such an overreach of the truth. I mean, she didn't shoot him because he was black. She made a mistake. The guy could have been white, too.
Well, one of the officers was black, for what that's worth, but right, exactly. She mixed up her gun and her taser. It's got none of this has got anything to do with race, but it does have to do with resisting the police, with resisting arrest, with fleeing the scene. Which this guy was doing now for the second time. It worked for him the first time, and that's the consistent. That's the common denominator in most of these cases.
Mm-hmm. And I know the revolution will be mostly peaceful, but what is the situation on the ground in Minneapolis and in Brooklyn Center now that the National Guard has been scrambled and there's been looting and violence that has occurred?
Well, it's terrible. Frankly, it's just terrible. There was a 7 p.m. curfew last night covering most of the Twin Cities metropolitan area. The Minnesota Twins homeowner got canceled. Other professional sports events were canceled. Everything shut down. There was rioting in Brooklyn Center, and then the police chief gave a press conference, and he referred to the word riot, and a reporter yells, "There was no riot," and he says, "Yes, there was a riot. I was there." And all these reporters start booing and yelling, "Oh, no riot! Peaceful protest."
Right.
And the chief, and if you look at the video footage, it's a riot. The chief is talking about the fact that one of his officers was hit in the head with a brick and had to be taken to the hospital, and the protesters, rioters are hurling various objects at the police officers. But that's the kind of news media that we've got in Minnesota.
Your news media was all over, Gannon. I mean, if any of us acted like that in Chicago, they would shut us down. I couldn't believe that they were screaming at him. I watched that whole press conference and thought, who are these people? And oh my gosh, relax.
It's unbelievable, and it starts with the Minneapolis Star-Tribune, which is the dominant newspaper in the state. And this morning, they ran a story that was basically a paean, a tribute, to Daunte Wright, the guy who was trying to flee the scene and wound up getting shot. And if you look at his Facebook page, it's all guns, wads of cash, drugs, gang signs. And there's just a complete lack of realism about what's going on the streets of these cities.
And so, of course, it's interesting, the curfew, too. I mean, it just seems to be, this is sort of their every problem is a nail because all they have is a hammer. Let's lock down the law-abiding. It's like locking down the healthy
right.
And turn over the streets to the marauders. I noted the symbolic takings that were occurring at the dollar store, for example.
Yeah, well, that's right. And there's this whole mentality that looting is okay. And did anybody get arrested for looting? I hope so. But generally speaking, people just go rampaging through strip malls and breaking windows and walking out with merchandise.
Yeah, actually, hasn't there been a call? I thought I saw a call for businesses to stop calling the police about retail theft.
I haven't seen that. It wouldn't be surprising, but I haven't.
Yeah,
I haven't seen that.
So if you're a business, unless there's an armed robbery, if it's just retail theft, number one, let the thief go. Number two, don't call police. Or unless I don't know. So I don't know actually. So per Mrs. Warren Wilhelm in New York City, if somebody steals from you, you're not to call police, but you are to try to intercede to stop the theft, or. Because there's a promotion of vigilante justice on the one hand, but then this is looting is reparations on the other hand. So it's hard to know what to do as a business owner other than perhaps not locate your business in Minneapolis.
Well, I can tell you what the city of Minneapolis said in a letter to every business located in downtown Minneapolis in advance of the Derek Chauvin trial. They said, well, here are some suggestions. One, you may want to hire private security. Two, you may want to put up permanent barriers, permanent bars and barriers of various kinds to protect your store. And three, whatever you do, make sure you get your important papers off the premises. In other words, your store may get burned down. There's nothing we can do to stop it, so at least move your important papers somewhere else. Kind of a fatalistic approach to rioting and looting.
And this is something that's particularly local, but it's important context. Since last May, the George Floyd Square, which has become like this George Floyd autonomous zone, 19 shootings have occurred in the area since Floyd's death, several of them fatal. The aunt of one shooting victim said her nephew was unable to receive medical attention because those occupying the area refused to let law enforcement into the zone. The autonomous zone has also had a negative impact on black business owners who report they have lost 75% of their business due to the lack of traffic in the area. So I don't think people were aware that there was this lawless autonomous zone going on in Minneapolis like we saw in the Pacific Northwest.
It's true. It is going on. I believe there have been 4 shooting deaths in that autonomous zone. So everybody knows George Floyd's name, right? You know, the great hero of the movement. I don't know the names of any of those 4 people who since then have been shot in essentially the same place and killed. And if business is only down by 75%, I'm a little surprised. I would think it'd be down by about 100%. And so it's very much like that Seattle autonomous zone that the police finally came in and cleared out. It's a lawless area, and this is one of the ways in which cities die.
Do you expect that the defund police movement, especially with this happening in Ilhan Omar's backyard, will find renewed energy?
Yes. Well, I think it will. I mean, the Minneapolis City Council actually voted to take steps toward defunding the police, which they don't have a legal ability to do. So what they wanted to do was to amend the Minneapolis City Charter, which requires a police force of a certain size, and change that to some kind of social worker force or something. And there's a lawsuit going on right now in which mostly black residents of the north side of Minneapolis are suing to try to make the city comply with the charter and bring on board enough police officers to meet that requirement. So there's a lot going on. Yeah, there's a defund the police movement. There's also a pushback, a refund the police movement, which is coming in large part from black residents.
He is John Hinderaker. He's the president of the Center for the American Experiment and founder of PowerlineBlog.com. John, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Hey, thank you, Dan. Bye-bye.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to Dan and Amy on your smartphone. Download the AM560 mobile app today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
Signature Bank is Chicago's fastest growing independently owned business bank. It's a bank where relationships still matter. Signature Bank knows your name and your story. I'm Dan Proft, and